So I'd like to welcome everybody as people are starting to trickle in to our call today. We are going to have a very exciting conversation today with four of some of the most wonderful people I've had the chance to get to know over the years. And I know many of you have also had a chance to get to know many of them as well. For those who aren't familiar with the faces on the screen, I'm going to kind of walk through who we have. Ari Brodke, kind of wave, Ari. Ari grew up in Omaha, has been in Israel for the past 10 years, and he's working for a think tank that he'll kind of share some thoughts on what he's experiencing. Ron Lugazi, who is our shlicha for a couple of years. Wonderful having you back on the screen. And Eliad, who is also a shliach for many years. Many people still enjoy Eliad's words. And then a friend of mine, Albert Ben Shlush, who's been a part of our partnership community for well over 20 years, who lives in Akko, who really has a unique perspective on the current situation that he's experiencing, and being able to be with us today to kind of tell us a little bit about what he's seen. And if you're familiar with our partnership program, it's a partnership that we have with Western Galilee, that Omaha is part of a consortium of 16 other communities, and we've been one of the leading communities in this partnership in Western Galilee, which includes Akko, Mata Asher, and many of us have visited over and over the years with the families and people in Akko. So I want to welcome Albert to our community and have him give us an overview of how he's experiencing and seeing things in Akko.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit sick. I got the flu, but because Alan asked me, I came for this conversation. I start what's happened. Last Tuesday, we start with a demonstration of 1,500 people, Arab, from the old city of Akko. That regular demonstration, and after 2 hours, everything changed. About 150 young people, I say young, between 15 to 20 years old, they decide to start to destroy everything that belonged to the Jewish in the old city of Akko. They start with the restaurant of Uri Buri. They start destroy and burn it. The hotel of Uri Buri, it's burned. All the restaurant that belong to the Jewish, it's burned. They continue day after, no police on the street, nothing. They did what they want. They continue on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, every day. One day destroy, the second night they burn. They start with the hotel, all the suite. The riots was completely in all the old city of Akko, even in the marine. They burn the yacht of they belong to the Jewish in the water also, and they didn't finish with burning. They start looting from the clothes, shoes, everything. They came with handbag and they start to carry on everything they found in the stores of the Jewish, even if spices restaurant, a spices shop. They took everything and destroyed everything. Saturday morning start to be a little bit quiet because the soldier come inside the city and the police come inside the city. And since Sunday until now, they rest the security, not the police, the security depart from we call it the Shabak. They start to arrest all those people. They know everyone through the phone. They know who was in the riots, and they start to arrest them, and maybe they will sit for a long time in the jail. Today, Uri Buri came to my office, and he talked to me, and I found for him a place in the beach of Akko that he maybe next week he will start to open his restaurant again until that he restored all the damage in his original restaurant. I found for him a place for about 6 months that he can start and work. He believed in coexistence. He believed that those criminals that did all the damage in the city will be arrested. Most of his workers, they're Arabs, and he want to continue. He believe in peace. And I want to say something. Akko is a unique city, and most of the time we're living in coexistence. In the last 20 years, I was the CEO of the Akko Festival, and they build the relationship all the time. And all of them work with me. It was really, really wonderful life. Something happened, not just in Akko, in all the involved city in Israel. All the youngs, like someone beat them and they start to make a problem in all the involved city. I hope that will stop. And yesterday, it was also the rocket missile to Akko from Lebanon. And I saw the missiles on the sky, they fell in the sea, but I saw them. It was very, suddenly, you move from one position to the second position. So this is in briefly what happened in Akko last week and during this week.
Albert, thank you. You shared with us the other day that shortly after this started, that there were leaders from both the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian communities
Yes.
that came together. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Last, the riot start on Tuesday night, and Thursday, the Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, came, and the day after, the president of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, came to Akko, and all this week, all the ministers of all the government, every day, 2 or 3 ministers coming to Akko to see and promise and how to help all those business. Now the the property tax check every business and value the damage, and they're going to fix it as soon as possible. Most of the business that destroy want to come back and build again the business in the old city of Akko.
Thank you. Eliad, would you like to also share from your seat in Akko, what you're seeing, what your experience? First of all, how is your family?
We are good with all the new circumstances. I think we are trying to be optimistic and to fight on our happiness and on our well-being here in Akko. And it's something very funny because all the time I mention Omaha, when all the time I give conversations in my current job, and I said that I did a program that's called Eye on Israel, and all the time I used to share the differences between newspapers from different denominations like Haaretz, and then newspapers and TV shows and BBC and Sky News and Fox News, and what are the differences when they report on current events. And it's funny because Albert says like how things like zoom out from all the events that happens. From my perspective, I see it from the eyes of my kids. That on Tuesday night, as Albert says, the demonstrations became riots, and all the stores were or set on fire. But for us, the most significant night was between Wednesday to Thursday, when there was the lynch in Akko, and actually 2 lynches. One of them was of my friend Elad Barzilai, lives in our neighborhood. And I've heard it from my son, because my son studies at school with his son. And it was so scary when Nehorai, my son, came and told me, do you know who is it? It's Elad, it's Lavi's father. And then from that point, I think all the story changed, because all the time we as adults try to make sure how to give the narrative to our kids. But here the kids came to me, my kids came to me and told me the story. And since then, I think they were very scared and they checked that the doors are closed. And I think that the most difficult part is all the social media and all the WhatsApp posts that you see all the time, how they're promoting from one street to another. And they say they're near to the municipality building. And you see that the police does not do anything. Thanks God, now we have the border patrol in our city that came. And I think that they're going to be so fat after that because all the citizens give them so many foods and candies and goodies while they are in our city in Akko. In Akko, people love to host. I'm sure many people in Omaha know it very well. But the situation is very, very challenging now, and the disappointment is big. And I think that now it's the time for the recovery and for the healing. And the fact that that Uri Buri came to Albert and he has the person to talk with and they start to plan for the future. It's something very, very controversial, even here in my city in Akko. Another front is what happens like in the south and with other soldiers. Like I'm sure that you have all heard that on Wednesday, one of the soldiers, Omer Tabib, was killed by an anti-tank missile. And Omer is from my new partnership region. Now I'm the director of Yokneam Megiddo that are connected to Atlanta and St. Louis. And it was new situation to see Moshav and Moshav Eliakim devastated. How in one day we are all gathered together there in the Moshav in order to commemorate Omer, in order to share our love. And I think that the situation is so challenging even for the federations and for the communities on the other side of the oceans, because they want to do, people want to do and want to share their way, the way how they want to connect to the things that happen here in Israel. For instance, they asked me to come to the funeral with a bouquet of flowers and to share. This is from the federations of Atlanta and St. Louis, because we want to be together with you. And since the crisis started, I really like, Omaha is my home. So it's not like people called and text messages and all the time, feeling you that we're together, and we're so grateful for it because we really feel that we are not alone. And the things that happen in Israel, it's not only if you're in the south or in the east or in the north. Now it's everywhere. As Albert mentioned, the rocket that came in Akko, in the sea in Akko yesterday. So this is, I think, that the challenging situation that we need to really take a deep breath and see how we are going to get out of it and plan for the future, because we are here and this is the new situation.
So thank you, Elliot. I have a question for both you and Albert. One of the beautiful parts of our partnership relationship with the Western Galley is the focus on coexistence. And we have communities that are mixed with Jews and Arabs and Druze. How is that work going to continue?
You're mute, Albert.
In the Akko municipality, we sit yesterday with the mayor, Shimon Lankri, and the CEO of the municipality, and the head of the community department, and the education department, and social department, and we talk how to build program. They were sitting before with all the principal of the schools, Jewish and Arab, and also all the non-profit organization, how to build program to bring, especially in the education system, to bring those young back for coexistence. And we are working on it all the time. And I hope, because they understood that it can continue. And we know that all the riots is come from the criminal, not from the people, those good people. So, I can't say that now everything is nice, kissing and hanging. No. A lot of people call to avoid to buy from the businesses of the Arab. I don't believe in this. I continue to buy from the businesses of the Arabs, sitting with them. I have a lot of friends. All of them against what's happened in Akko. So we know in Akko especially that the criminal did this thing. It's, you know, that because a lot of businesses don't pay, you said, דמי חסות, Riyad, דמי חסות.
כמו מיסים כאילו? כמו... like taxes of the businesses.
העולם התחתון.
Salaries.
No, that they pay that they will not get hurt.
Oh, okay.
Like, yeah.
You know that they should to pay for all the businesses. They don't pay for the criminal to keep.
Oh.
So this time they found the opportunity to do everything. They start from the criminal, like the mafia. You have to pay to the mafia to keep your business. So they never pay for them. All the Jewish businesses. So that for them it was the opportunity to take all those young and throw them. And for them it was a celebration. Because they're 15 to 19 years old, that's what happened. I want to add something that in the old city we have the JNF Visitor Center. It comes from New York, and they build a wonderful, and the first night they destroy, and the second they burn it. The JFS Center in the old city of Akko also. They didn't leave even one place. Also, the tourism department that belonged to my company, they also destroy everything, but they didn't burn it because the family Arab living above it, and they avoid them to destroy and burn it more than did before.
Thank you, Albert. Ron, it's a pleasure to see you. You want to share some thoughts?
Well, I feel that first of all, I want to say thank you because I see a lot of faces of people and also some people that are not here, but that, you know, just was interested how I'm doing and was asking if everything is fine. So thank you. It means a lot. I know, just to know you have somewhere out there back in Omaha. But I feel that there is so many directions you can talk about what's going on. I feel there is this narrative war in the social media, or between Bella Hadid to all of the other people that are just all over social media. That's what's going on. I see all of my friends from Omaha or from Israel just like sharing all kind of thoughts, and everyone just crashing. And then there is the things that happen right here between us. I work now in construction, so yeah, that's a big change. But here in construction, most of the workers and the labor are Israeli Arabs / Palestinians, and from working together one next to each other day by day, suddenly you feel the tense and kind of inconvenient and not sure how to talk or communicate things with each other. And then you are standing in the Israeli towers in the middle of Tel Aviv, and there is this alert, and you're going and you're standing next to Palestinians and Israeli Arabs in shelters. So that's kind of an, I know, awkward situation. And then there is, I want to say, it's the first time for me as a grown-up person living on their own, being under attack. So the first alerts here in Tel Aviv that happened on when was it, like Tuesday or Wednesday? I was just standing in the balcony staring at Iron Dome crashing, and I called my parents, and I'm like, they live in Golan Heights, so everything there is quiet. And I called them and I'm like, you don't know what's going on here. And they're like, what are you doing? Why are you standing in the balcony? Go stand in a safe place. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how to handle all of those things, because I feel there is a lot to go to and talk about in so many different directions. And there is Hamas, but there is here inside of us. And I feel that this is the most painful point, that from outside, from Gaza, I think we used to, have it every few years or once a year. There is like this attack, and we luckily have Iron Dome to protect us. And then we kind of, I know, it's a terrible thing to say, but we used to it. But when the things came here inside of us, between the people, we live next to each other and we work together, and we kind of, under the circumstances, share our life together. And then I feel that something broke in this point. And also, maybe that's more me being on the younger end, but just going, scrolling through TikTok videos and seeing a lot of videos of Arab kids and Arab, it just shows you that, because you're in the area, going and throwing rocks and sharing and encouraging people to go and to protest. And I don't know, I feel that's, for me, the scary part or the painful part of all of the story.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. Ari, you have a perspective that I think is of interest to people. The work you've been doing has to deal a lot with current events and politics. You have some insight that you're willing to share. But first, you have to say hello to your mom and grandmother.
This is true. I'm very grateful to have them here, and now you don't have to, say that I never call, right? Yeah, I think that my perspective, the first thing that came to mind when we started this conversation is just that I've really experienced now conflict in Israel from sort of all sides. I remember very vividly both the Second Lebanon War and which was a cast-led in 2009. I remember experiencing that from abroad, like what it's like to be a Jew in the diaspora who's very connected to Israel. And then, of course, in 2014, I had my own personal experience in the Army, very involved in the 2014 war in Protective Edge. And now I'm experiencing another conflict, but as an Israeli civilian, and sort of getting a sense of what the Israeli home front is going through. So to see all that full circle, it's very, very interesting. And there's, a lot that I could talk about. And I think that before I get into anything geopolitical, which is like the main lens that I sort of look at all this through, in terms of just like personal experiences, right? Everyone sort of asks, how are you doing? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? So my building is a bomb shelter. It's on the ground floor. It's a great opportunity to meet your neighbors, I suppose, in a very twisted way. But I remember very vividly, I think it was Monday night, that Hamas fired rockets toward Jerusalem, and then they said something to the effect that we're going to fire rockets at Tel Aviv around 9 p.m. I came home from my office kind of late, about 8 p.m., told my roommates, I said, hey, if you hear a siren around 9, that's what's going on, just so you're aware. I figured that if you tell them, it's like, on the one hand, it's a little scary. On the other hand, at least they're mentally prepared. And you can sort of tell them where to go, what to do. Running down to the bomb shelter on that first night, it was very interesting because I was sort of the most collected person in the room. There was a girl next to me there who was Israeli, and she's, lived here her whole life. She was very visibly shaking and, trying to bring levity. I was like, oh, first time, huh? Yeah, it's from where my house is situated, the Iron Dome battery that's in Herzliya is pretty close. So not only do you hear, by the way, you can hear the explosions from many, many cities away. Like I can hear in Herzliya explosions that are probably taking place above Ashdod most of the time, which is pretty far south. So when something is close, it's really close and it's really loud. And we also we know that it's really close when we hear the Iron Dome battery in Herzliya, firing an interceptor, because then, you hear like the sort of whooshing sound, but it sounds like a freight train. And for people who don't recognize the difference between a sound of an incoming rocket and an outgoing rocket, it's very scary. I unfortunately know exactly what an incoming rocket sounds like. And, so I tried to comfort people. I'm like, oh, don't worry. An incoming one sounds like this. And then, it's kind of weird. But in terms of how it's really affecting the people I know, a lot of the friends that I have here are from outside of Israel originally. A lot of them are from North America specifically. And I can tell you that there is, I haven't seen like this much sort of collective like fear and concern and terror over not what's going on here, but what they're seeing happening at home. One of the people who's in my office, we have an intern who's the incoming president of the Jewish Students Association at Stanford. And after, by the way, a week of sort of like not coming into the office because we were all working from home to be closer to shelters, she came in and she just, basically had a breakdown, like could not work, could not do anything. She was so angry and upset, and she felt like, shouting from the rooftop and no one's hearing. The way that she described it is like in a movie when someone is a ghost and they're trying to interface with the people, but no one hears them. That's what it feels like. And the matters that are coming up on social media, like what you alluded to, Ron, are not questions of, peace, how do we resolve the conflict? It's about a question of do we have a right to be here at all? It speaks to much deeper questions, and I can get into that if we want later on. But yeah, my political perspective, I've been mostly focused on what's going on around Israel's borders more so than within its society. Within its society, we would need like 3 hours to really unpack that. It's really complicated, and there's a lot of internal Israeli politics as well. But I think that I'm pretty intimately familiar with Palestinian society now, and I think that one thing I can't understate is that what we're seeing now was an orchestrated event that has a much wider frame. Iran is deeply involved in that wider frame. There's Palestinian national elections that are deeply involved in what we see going on now. Hamas declared its intent to initiate a conflict more than a month ago, way before Sheikh Jarrah and way before anything on the Temple Mount. And there's a lot of things that are sort of going unnoticed, and a lot of causes here that are really leading to the situation that we find ourselves in. And tonight, the big news in Israel is the discussion of a ceasefire. Is a ceasefire going to happen? Is a ceasefire not going to happen? And, as an American, I can sort of relate to that sentiment of, we just want the conflict to end. We don't want any more bloodshed. However, I know I don't speak for all Israelis, but I speak for a lot of them when I say that a ceasefire right now is not, it does not help the state of Israel. It is the only people who benefit from it are Hamas. And moreover, a lot of people would see it as a betrayal of the citizens who live down south, because, Ron and I experience this maybe once every 7 years, but the people who live down south, this is a weekly thing. If you live on the kibbutzim that are right next to the fence, you don't even have a siren. You just hear the whistle coming in and you hit the deck, and that's the best you can do. You raise kids in that environment. There's now 2 generations, 3 generations of kids who have been living under this constantly. And Israel does not yet have a long-term plan for what to do about the Gaza Strip. And, that's an ongoing question, but a lot of people are saying that they're prepared to ride this out. They're prepared to stay in their bomb shelters for more weeks, for more months, if that means that there is if we're putting an end to this, if this isn't until the next cycle, if it's bringing it to an end. And there's some really profound implications of all that in terms of, moral dilemmas that Israel will face and what that actually means. And then also how that fits with the political situation in the United States, which, I need not tell you that from our perspective is very troubling. The idea that, you would sort of equivocate between sides.
So Ari, you've touched on a couple of major things that would call for a greater conversation. Maybe we can bring you back at another time. But one issue that you brought up, and Ron also talked about it, was the social media that Americans are seeing, or non people in Israel that are seeing, and it's really disrupting the actual story of what really is going on in Israel. And that challenge we see every day as more and more people are putting pressure on President Biden to concede more to Hamas and to create a ceasefire for Israel. And the Pew Research Center came out with a study a couple of weeks ago that basically said about 30 to 40% of young Jews just don't have a connection to Israel. And even with the years of birthright and all the different trips that have been going on, I'm surprised that more young Jews are not having a solid relationship with Israel. Again, that's my feeling, but I think that we have work to do as strong supporters of Israel to kind of shift that needle in a different direction. I know there are a lot of people on that want to also say a few things. I've noticed that there are a couple of families that have recently moved to Israel. Nancy Corin, are you still in Israel?
Yeah, we're living in Jerusalem. We're living right in the center of Jerusalem, about a 10-minute walk from the old city. And yeah, I can say a few things because even though Jerusalem was the first place to take a rocket attack, the powers that be seem to have chosen not to send more rockets our direction. And I think it's probably because of the closeness to the Temple Mount. And one of the things, we live right by Kikar Zion, which is the big square where most of the protests take place. And so what we see from our apartment window and here is that it's kind of orchestrated at a certain time of the day that people will kind of either, sometimes I think people are being bussed in and they show up and they spend time on loudspeakers saying some pretty vile stuff about anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab sentiments. And then they leave, and then the next day you have a group that comes in and has a rally against that kind of hateful language. And one of the things that I've seen happen here in Jerusalem is the explosions that we've heard seem to be contained into like East Jerusalem area, perhaps. And I know several of the demonstrations were happening close to the Damascus Gate, but didn't seem to come into the old city as much. Not the old city, into Western Jerusalem as much. The types of things that I'm starting to hear about, which I find hope in, pardon me for being a Pollyanna, is that there are many groups here in Jerusalem that are talking out against having separations between individuals based on their ethnic identities or religious identities. And so I see things like people trying to gather other people together and say, let's give out flowers to people living in East Jerusalem. Let's have an online webinar that went on tonight. Unfortunately, my Hebrew wasn't good enough to hear it all, but talking about cooperation between Muslim Israelis who also consider themselves to be Palestinians and Jewish members of Israeli society. And so I see a lot of that happening as well, which I think those are conversations that need to happen. I won't play it off as like, you know, the police aren't around there. They have a pretty heavy presence down on the square behind us. Like when one group comes in, there's police on large horses blocking one area, and there's police cars on the other side blocking the other side, so that people are very contained. It seems to me that it's pretty much orchestrated, that people know when they're going to be there if police are on either side of them, containing them so that they don't go into other neighborhoods and stir up trouble. One thing that I did notice, our neighborhood is pretty mixed in terms of Muslims and Jews going to the same stores, eating out at the same restaurants and that type of thing. I've noticed a lesser presence of individuals from the Muslim community in the center of town. It's not affecting people who are doctors and nurses, and it's not affecting people who are working in the healthcare profession as pharmacists and that type of thing. But I just think in terms of maybe the comfort level of the neighborhoods mixing, it looks a little less like people are feeling comfortable coming into downtown Jerusalem. And that's just a perspective from my side. So
Nancy, can I ask you a question? So you and Charles moved to Israel about a year ago?
actually, Ron interviewed us, and we ended up coming in August. So, Ari was mentioning about the bomb shelters. We're in a place that has what's called a ma'amad, which is a safe room in our own apartment building. And I know people in Jerusalem have been trying to open up their homes for individuals from the South to come here because it seems quieter in some ways, which I know sounds kind of strange, but in terms of taking rocket attacks, it is definitely a different situation right now. People are out on the streets, and one of the things that I was rather shocked by, that I think it was Monday night, was that first 7 rockets that came towards Jerusalem. Tuesday morning, people were out, and kind of surprised me. And I called my brother, who's lived here since '73, and he was like, this is the way we are. If we can live our life and just go about what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do, because that shows that, we're here and we're here to stay, basically. So
thank you for your insight. Thank you. So I'd like to open it up to the people who are also on the Zoom. If anybody has questions or comments, or like Nancy, living in Israel and want to share some thoughts, raise your hand, and Jesse will let you in. I'm not able to see who's got their hands on, so no questions? Then I will continue asking questions.
And just to clarify, we'll need people to use the under reactions, you can get to raise hand there, and then that will pop up visibly for us. Thanks,
Jesse. So I think one of the things that Nancy kind of talked on about it is the day after. So you talk about the rockets flying at certain times of the day and night. Does life go back to somewhat normal during the day? Do kids go to school, or is school out? You talked about working from home. What's daily life like during daylight? Anybody can talk about that?
I can just say in a few sentences about Akko. So after the riot started, the decision was made that the schools will not be opened. So the kids were at home. So we're very regular to it because of COVID. So it was something like a continuation for my kids. And in other places that I'm sure that Ron and Ari will share from their perspective what happens in the days. So
I'll say I think it's a matter of where you're from. Here in Tel Aviv area, it was like couple days that were off, that was really rockets over here. So I know that my work, a lot of people needed to stay home with the kids, and I think that still now some places don't have school, but in the south of Israel, which is, I think, things have not stopped for a second. Here it feels like we came back for normal life and everything is fine. And yesterday we went out for a restaurant, and I'm going out with friends and all of those things. But in the south of Israel, even now as we're sitting down, I'm getting alerts about still rockets are being sent there. So things there are not normal. I have some coworkers that live in Ashdod and Ashkelon, and they come every day to Tel Aviv, and they don't sleep at night because all the time there is rockets coming from Gaza area. I want to say it's on hourly basis. Things are not normal in the south of Israel right now.
Ari, any comments on daily life?
Yeah, I think that I speak for a lot of people. I think myself included as well. I wouldn't say that it's like giving me, sort of flashbacks to 2014 in the sense that like I'm out of the military now, but at the same time, wow, my English has escaped me from being here for 10 years. Daruch, like I feel very like daruch, like how do you translate that? Maybe
I would say tense. I would say tense. It's
but it's like a combination of tense and like prepared. Like you're just sort of like on guard all the time. You have your wits about you,
yes.
and it's physically exhausting. Most of my friends have been pretty sleep deprived, having trouble getting to bed at night just because of the, what happens if you have to wake up at 3 a.m. if you can't hear your siren from your room. I know a bunch of people who their windows are so, they've like got these sound insulated windows because Tel Aviv street noise, and they can't hear the sirens, and then they hear the booms and it's too late, and then they freak out. It's tense. It's affecting people's mental health, physical health. I would say that, in terms of my daily life, it's, you try to work, and then every 5 minutes you're talking to your friends and it's like, hey, have you got called up for reserve duty yet? Like, is your unit like gonna happen? Like, look at what's going on in the north. By my kibbutz, there was an armed drone that penetrated from the Jordan Valley, and apparently it was Iranian. So like it's like normal, but not normal. This is it's a really extreme situation. And I think that just to illustrate Ron's point, I'm gonna go ahead and pop into the chat the English version of the Home Front Command's like live updates, just so you guys can scroll through this and get a sense of how frequent rockets are falling, not necessarily in our area, but just all the time, minute on minute on minute.
Thank you, Ari.
I
Greta,
just want to add
go ahead, Eliad.
one small thing. We used to host in our region in Megiddo, and social workers, psychologists from the Gaza Strip, from people in Ashkelon and Ashdod, just to give them the opportunity to breathe fresh air. And one of the things that I've heard are two things about. The first thing is people are afraid to take a shower, because when they're taking a shower, they don't really hear if there is a siren, what are the noises, and that people are, kids mainly, when they're motorcycles, they really think that this is the siren, and then they need to escape to a shelter or to a safe room. So this is one of the things that on a regular basis, on the routine, that other places in Israel try to make the life of the people who live in the south easier. So we bring them and we spoil them with a lot of great things and great entertainment in order for them to feel like more refreshed when they are returning back to the south. So these are like a few highlights that I've remembered that they shared with us.
And I will say that I had here only 2 days of war in Tel Aviv, and it was the night of Tuesday and the night of Wednesday, and then Thursday night I drove to my parents' house in Golan Heights, and Friday during the day I just slept all day because I was exhausted from those 2 sleepless nights. And also I will say about the showers is not only you're afraid that you won't hear the siren, is that in places like me and Ari live, that we don't have a sheltered room in our house and we need to go out to the staircase with the neighbors. You don't want to go out with a towel to meet all of your neighbors that you never met before. And and I will say another thing that for me during the night, Ari mentioned that people can hear, and for me, I don't really know my neighbors here. I know them just a little bit, but not too much. I don't live here too long. And then the first night, I didn't woke up from the alarms in the middle of the night. It was 2 of them. And then I woke up for the third one, and I went outside, and my neighbor told me, yeah, I didn't know if to wake you up or not. And I'm like, of course, wake me up. Don't let me sleep here while rockets are just falling all over.
I want to give Greta a chance to ask a question or say something.
Sure. Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for your thoughts and personal experiences, what's going on. And we are deeply, deeply, watching I-24 News and all the news here, and really feeling what you guys are going through. And I'm a good friend of Sharon Brodkey. That's why I'm on the phone. I've known Ari since before he was born. But Ari, I have a question for you. In your opinion, so you had said that a ceasefire would not benefit Israel right now. And in your opinion, what do you think really needs to happen on both sides in order for a ceasefire to come to fruition? I don't know if you can answer that in 5 minutes or 2 minutes, but just, I know both sides. I don't know if they can come to the table and negotiate. I just don't know. But what are your thoughts?
I can't really give like a prescription. I can only give an analysis. No one elected me to make any decisions for them, so I'm not going to presume to do that. The Hamas achieved their operational goals on the first day, which was to promote themselves as the defenders of Jerusalem, which is the one common denominator across the Palestinian diaspora, across Palestinians living in Israel, across the Arab world in general. So when they fired rockets at Jerusalem, when they were setting demands on, they were trying to set the agenda and set the policy priorities for the state of Israel. They're trying to show that relative to the PA, they are the ones who are actually the power players in this equation. They achieved their operational goal as soon as that happened. And then as soon as they were also able to stoke tensions within, the borders of Israel amongst the Arab Israelis / Palestinians who are living within Israel's borders. In that sense, they achieved their goals. Now, what the IDF has been doing so far is, without a sort of overall strategic objective, trying to limit the overall military capacity and capabilities of Hamas and Islamic Jihad as much as possible. And they've done, just in terms of a tactical perspective, they've accomplished really incredible things. But, this is Israel's on borrowed time when it comes to the international community. The condemnation came out basically as soon as things started. And the question has to be, does Israel pursue a ceasefire at the expense of the citizens who live close to the Gaza border, just to buy time until the next round of things? And also, would a ceasefire even work? I remember very vividly in 2014, one of the most traumatic incidents that happened was, they called it the Black Friday, and that was when Givati soldiers were ambushed. Some of my colleagues were ambushed, and they took Hadar Goldin's body into a tunnel, and we still are waiting to receive his remains. That happened during a ceasefire, during an internationally brokered ceasefire. So I'm not going to say that it needs to happen or doesn't need to happen. I think that everyone wants, obviously, an end to the violence, but to leave the elephant in the room, standing there, it's not exactly a long-term solution. So
I will join what Ari was saying, and I will say that during Sukeitan, I think both me and Ari was in the army at the same time, and during Sukeitan we lost 67 soldiers, and it's been 4 or 5 years since, and we're going back on the exactly same round. So a lot of people are exhausted, because why would we send our soldiers again to get hurt or to die, for it to go all over again? So that's why I feel that people are so frustrated from just stop fighting now, because we got tired and we want to give a break for everyone, but nothing is really being solved, and then we go for it all over again.
So this is the third time. So in 2007, 2014, 2021, Hamas keeps shelling its rockets at Israel. So what you're saying is we need to do, or Israel needs to do something now to prevent another 7 years of Hamas building up its rockets and its aggressive actions towards Israel.
just to correct that, Alan, this isn't the third time. This is closer to like the 7th or 8th. There's been a lot of smaller operations that never made it to the US. In terms, there was what was called Choref Ham and Gishmei Kites, and a lot of, like, during the Second Lebanon War, there was also an active operation going on in Gaza. And you can't ignore also the events that were happening in 2018 with the marches on the fence. That was and the balloons, of the incendiary balloons that were destroying agriculture in kibbutzim. So like, this isn't it's we have the big wars we've had 3 or 4 of the big wars, but in terms of just an ongoing threat, it really is every day.
Thank you for correcting me. So we have about 10 minutes left. There have been a couple of questions in the chat, more about social media, and then what can we do in America to turn the tide, I would guess it's the negative tide, on how some people in America view Israel. The media, Mati Friedman, a journalist, wrote a piece, I think in 2014 after the war then with Gaza, about really looking at how we analyze our own media and the role that media plays in exploiting the conflict, in exploiting it in a way that reflects Israel as the negative perpetrator and the Palestinians and Hamas leaders as the victims. And that's how the American media sees Israel. We need to educate the media in America on appropriately viewing and interpreting and communicating on how Israel is, as Tari's first point, has the right to exist as a country, and it has the responsibility to protect its people and shouldn't be subjected to rockets from all of its borders. I want to leave the next 7 or 8 minutes up to the four of you to just share some concluding comments. And also, some other feedback that I've been getting is that you guys are wonderful, and would you be willing to do this again? And to just kind of update people in Omaha. It's great to see people smiling. I mean, Eliad, your smile is beautiful. Ron, your smile is beautiful. Albert, I see the stress in your face, and I'm sorry about that. But you've always been, for me, excuse me, a beautiful light of what Akko has done over the years. So I'm going to leave the four of you to share some final thoughts. Anybody can go first. Go ahead. Albert, go ahead.
Thank you for letting us explain what happened in our area. And I want to add something. The Hamas is operating by Iran. This is the main issue. The Hamas operating by Iran, and Biden want to achieve agreement with Iran now. It's not good for Israel.
Yeah, thank you.
That's why he pushed Israel for the ceasefire.
So to that point, we need to put pressure on our elected officials. Thank you. Eliad?
I think that when you asked what you can do, from my perspective, it's the small conversations with many people that you have. We all the time say that as a shaliach, you need to make sure that you are surrounded by a lot of people and that you have the small conversations and not only the big sessions and the big workshops that you do. Because I think that it's one of the big obligations of the government to help the entire Jewish world, to give the answers when people ask what really happens in Gaza and in Lebanon or in other places, because we know that the situation is not looks good in the international media. So this is on one hand, a small conversation with people that you know, and on the other hand, continue to be Omaha. I'm sure that like for all the shlichim that just spend even 1 year or 2 years, Omaha is a home, and we really feel you, and we feel the togetherness, and we really think that we will always be here for you as you were there for us as our home. And all the time say, I live only in my home is only in Akko or in Omaha, and we really feel the connection and continue with it, because it is really helpful. Even the texts, the messages, and the posts that you post on Facebook, it gives a lot of spirit and a lot of neshama to us here.
Thank you, Eliad. Ron?
Well, I will conclude. Well, I would like to there were a couple of questions there in chat. I'll say one, yes, me and Ari can be called in any point to back to do reserve service. And two, about the narrative question is, I feel that around the younger area, there is just a lot of black and white things and not much seeing the gray area. And you kind of have to choose a side, and a lot of influencers, as we like to call them today, are choosing sides, and it affects and it creates a lot of anti-Semitism and hate for Israel and hate for Zionism, which are not explaining well. I'm sure all of you understanding, not explaining well the situation. And speaking of Lebanon, I think Hezbollah is avoiding kind of getting into things right now. Things that are coming from the north are not officially from Hezbollah, and they're from different groups that kind of want to show, hey, Hamas, we're with you. We want to show some support, so we're shooting a little bit. But I think Hezbollah are right now not taking part of it. And in the end of it, I think that all of you that are right here, right now listening, I'm joining Eliad saying, just create conversation. Don't avoid talking about it. Don't just, conflict it with other people. Try to ask, try to understand, try to get a little bit deeper every time you can, because it's not easy. It's not something you can explain just right on the surface. Things here are a little bit more complicated, and if it was easier to solve, it would have been solved. So just, yeah, take a minute and have other people take another minute too.
Thank you. Ari?
So I feel bad after Eliad's wave of positivity to comment. To be honest, I'm so completely exhausted about, this fight over the narrative and over facts and over people's flippant use of language when they say things like war crimes or ethnic cleansing without a clue of what that actually means. Celebrities and the rest of us alike. That's exhausting. What I'm thinking about is the day after. And when I said I'm concerned about social media, I'm not as concerned about the posts as much as what I'm seeing violence in the diaspora against Jews for what is going on in Israel. And the greatest irony of that is that the people who are inflicting that violence are making the strongest case for Zionism that ever existed. And I have a feeling that we're going to see a wave of Aliyah after this conflict. I have a feeling that the diaspora community is going to have to, wherever they are, have a deep inner conversation with where are our red lines and where do we stand up and call things out, especially when it comes to groups like BLM that hitch their wagon to certain narratives, and they're very powerful and popular movements. But when you have, like, I'm not concerned about what's happening now so much as what I'm concerned about is the day after. And the only good thing about the internet and social media is that all this stuff is in the record. It's in the permanent record. And what we have to do wherever we are in the world is we have to, when this is over, call people out for their silence. If Black Lives Matter, then where were you when Jewish lives were being attacked? Where were you when people were legitimizing the death of Jews for being Jews? That's not something that's okay. And it's not something that, given our support of marginalized people throughout the centuries, that we would want in return. But unfortunately, we're learning that that's not necessarily a two-way street. So my only message is that the only way that we're going to get through this in the long term and have a strong diaspora and a strong Israel is if we hold people accountable for the things that we're seeing now, because no one's going to listen right this second. We really need to make sure that we're tracking who's saying what.
All right, thank you. Eliad, thank you. Albert, thank you very much. Ron, thank you. Wish you all to be safe, and can't wait to see you in person, although sometimes Zoom is okay. I get to see 4 of you at one time. Looking forward to a peaceful time to be with you, and thank you again. And I might call upon you again to do this in the future.
We are here.
Thank you for all of you being on.
Bye,
Nancy, good to
Shabbat
see you.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Can I say something? Because this is Joyce Ashley, and I was sorry to late to get into this meeting, but I had something come up. But there was this morning, there was a Democrat representative, and she was just knocking everybody, because it came in on my phone. She was just knocking down Israel. It was so horrible to hear that and say that it's Israel's fault. And she did no protection at all. She just said that they were really bad. We are really bad people, anybody from Israel. And she wants it to be put into writing now, and she wants to fight it. And she's presenting this in the House, as I understand. So I don't know if you had mentioned that or I'd heard anybody had heard that, but I did want to. I wrote it down, everything she said, and it was really
Thank you.
very scary.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay.
You're welcome. I just wanted to throw that out because I don't know if anybody else had seen that on their phone or not. And
Okay.
it's scary, very scary.
Well, with that being said, there's work that we have to do in America, and it starts with our elected officials, as well as with us. So again, Albert, Eliad, Ron, Ari, thank you for your time today, and be safe.